Do not buy a sword until you watch this video, because there are lots of things you might not know about, and if you buy the wrong sword, it could be dangerous. So welcome to the ultimate sword buyer's guide, and by the end of this video, you'll have the knowledge you need to make an informed and safe sword purchase. So if you are gifting a sword to someone this year or thinking about buying a sword someday, this video is for you. Today you'll be learning about sharp versus dull swords and the dangers of both of them, different steel and blade types, some essential accessories, avoiding the deadly rat tang, and some other things to watch out for. And then we're gonna go over one dangerous thing you definitely need to know about before you own any sword. So let's dive right in with a very important question. Are swords even legal? Well, if you're buying a dull sword, you'll be okay. Unless it looks super realistic and you use it to threaten people and create chaos, do not do that. But sharp swords are the tricky ones. But I will tell you, if you think sharpness isn't necessary and you could go with one of the dulls, there are a few big reasons to get a sharp sword over the dull versions, but we'll get into those later. Anyway, everywhere in the US, you can own a sharp sword and use it inside your home. And all but 10 states in the US allow you to carry your sword outside and use it outside without any permits or paperwork or nothing. You just go outside and use the sword. But I am not a legal professional, so do not take what I say as law. You should do your own research because laws can vary wildly from state to state and especially country to country. Now another huge question I get all the time, sharp swords versus dull swords, which one is right for you? I'll also go over some pros and some cons to both at the end of this segment, but before we talk about those differences, make sure you subscribe to get some creative sword ideas and stay updated on some secret subscriber-only sword deals. Alright, dull swords, these are perfect for decoration, anime conventions, cosplay, but they cannot be used for cutting. Don't do it. And we'll show you why later. But they can be valuable for practicing proper handling skills without the risk of cutting yourself. Things like practicing sheathing techniques, fancy cutting angles, and they're usually a bit cheaper, which sounds good, but that could be a downside. There's normally a smaller selection of dull swords too. If you're someone who loves anime, I'm sure you can find the dull version that you want. However, if you're gifting a sword to someone or yourself and you want a clean and elegant art piece, there's a huge selection of non-anime sharp swords with unpainted blade, different styles for different rooms, different aesthetics. If you want a clean cultural art piece, my advice is don't even look at the dull swords, just go straight to the sharps, because most of the dull swords are very vibrant anime related. But if you do want to get a dull sword for anime conventions, one thing you should definitely think about that many people don't know, if you use dull swords for dressing up in cosplay and going to the convention, you should be aware that some anime conventions do not allow metal swords even if they are dull. I know I've been shut down at a couple of anime cons that I've been to where I had to leave my sword at the door, so check your anime con before you go. But if you're serious about taking your sword to the anime con, you could consider a foam, wood, or plastic sword. The only downside to these swords is that they are much less durable. I mean, I've bumped into like one doorway and the paint just comes off, and they obviously bend and break a lot easier than a metal sword does. But if you need to go to an anime con, there's an option for you. But if you want the ultimate vibrant and realistic sword, you cannot beat the sharps. There are actually 3 reasons you might want to go for the sharp swords, and if these apply to you, then it's definitely worth the upgrade. I know it was worth it for me. Number 1, sharp swords are all around more premium with higher quality paint, handles, and steel. I mean, they are built to be sliced with, so everything has to be built a little tougher. And the paint is also a lot more durable and will be more vibrant for more time. Again, it's designed for slicing. But in my opinion, you just cannot beat a raw silver, unpainted, folded carbon steel blade. There's just something about looking at my own reflection in a carbon steel sword. It's a feeling that cannot be replaced, and I love it. Number 2, here at Mini Katana, all our sharp swords come with extra free accessories. And trust me, if you buy a sword, you're gonna want to buy a stand, and so that's an extra $14 you're gonna save, whereas if you bought a dull sword, you have to buy that. And before I tell you number 3, I want you to go delete that comment that you just wrote. When will I ever use a sharp sword? That's so not practical. But trust me, every time I have friends over, I will hand them one of my swords, and what happens next is a 100% money back guaranteed great time. I mean, seeing the smile on my friends' faces whenever they use the swords is something that money just cannot buy. And it's a great way to dispose of spoiled fruits, old boxes, use it for cooking, empty soda bottles, piñatas. Trust me, when you have a sword within arm's reach, you'll get creative and use it in ways you never thought. Now, before we get into the most important thing you need to know about buying a sword, here are some dull versus sharp pros and cons, and if this helps you decide what sword to buy, it would mean a lot to me if you hit the subscribe button. Now it's time for sword accessories. There are an overwhelming amount of sword accessories on the internet that people are gonna try to sell you, but there are only a couple that you actually need. Number 1, stands. A good stand stand is not just for display, but it also keeps your sword safe and easily accessible. But what really makes a difference is getting a fancy stand over a basic one. Although it can be more expensive, it really elevates your sword display more than you would think. Instead of it looking like you just slapped a sword in your kitchen, it can actually look like the sword's a part of the kitchen, if that makes sense. Getting very interior designy and having a high quality sword stand just makes your sword look a little more high quality. Number 2, cleaning kit. Got one right here. So maintenance is key to keeping your blade rust-free, sharp, and pristine, and cleaning kits include oil, cloths, and tools to maintain your katana's edge, and especially important, protect it from rust. If you have a sharp carbon steel sword in a moist environment, and especially if you are using that sword to slice things like watermelons, tatami mats, or pretty much anything, you are going to want a cleaning kit. I mean, if you're investing in a sword, you're going to want to clean your blade once every few months, and one cleaning kit will last years and multiple swords. So pick up one of these, keep your sword rust-free. That could be a downside to the sharp carbon steel swords, is because of the type of steel that's used. They are really sharp, but it means they can be prone to rust if you don't clean them, so clean them once a month with this bad boy. 20 bucks, it'll protect your $200 sword. I think it's worth it. Number 3, tatami mats. If you're interested in practicing cutting techniques or testing your sword sharpness, tatami mats are essential. I mean, these have been used for sword training for hundreds of years, but you will also need a tatami mat stand, you're gonna need to soak them, and it can be kind of a burden to get it going, but once you slice a tatami mat, they are just so satisfying and I love it. Now here's some things you need to watch out for. If you forget everything else in this video, do not forget what I'm about to say. Before you buy a sharp sword, there are 2 crucial things to look out for, or else your sword might break when you slice with it, and I'm sure you don't want half a sharp sword flying across your yard and into your neighbor's dog, so listen up. Number 1, the type of steel. Make sure your sharp sword is made of 1045, 1060, or 1095 carbon steel. If you are on a website that sells sharp swords and they don't mention it, do not buy that sword. Number 2, what is a rat tang? Dull swords, to cut cost and reduce weight, have a small strip of metal inside the handle, which is perfectly fine for displays and cosplays, but if you're using your sword for slicing, make sure your sharp sword is full tang, or else the blade will snap off and the blade will go flying and put holes in your pet lizard. So make sure you get full tang sharp swords, just like the ones we have on our website at minikatana.com. We have tons of incredible sharp, dull, anime, non-anime, affordable, and premium swords, so if you're gifting a sword to your friends, family, or yourself, check out minikatana.com, and if you have any specific questions, our support team is here to help. Now, I'll let you hit subscribe while I slice the tatami mat.